sorry for the delay in getting to you. We had fluctuations in our local network here at Columbia University, but it's a pleasure to be together with you. And I know we have several hundred students online, and what I would like to do is go straight to the questions. Actually, no, even before that, let me make a just a quick observation. Next week opens the UN General Assembly. That's on Wednesday, the 24th. On Tuesday, there will be the UN Climate Summit, and that is a special event called by UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon that will bring world leaders and business leaders and civic leaders together to focus on the climate challenge, one of the big topics of our course. The idea of the summit next week is not really a negotiation, but rather a kickoff to a year and 2 months of very tough, complicated negotiations that aim to conclude in Paris in December 2015 in the Conference of the Parties 21, the 21st Conference of the Parties of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. So, to put it more succinctly, next week's climate summit aims for a successful agreement at COP21 in December 2015 in Paris. And it's a big deal because we have been struggling since the UN Framework Convention was signed in 1992 and ratified and entered into force in 1994 to find a formula for global agreement that would be effective on slowing human-induced climate change, and so far don't have one. And just a couple of days ago, the Goddard Institute of Space Studies of NASA, which I'm proud to say is on the Columbia University campus, reported that the temperature in August worldwide was the warmest August in recorded history since records began in 1881. And the World Meteorological Organization, WMO, reported last week that the increase of greenhouse gas emissions in 2013 also was a record. So we're seriously off track, but next week's summit aims to help get us back on track. Just a prelude, and now let me turn to questions. And here's an excellent question from Susana Gonzalez. Professor Sachs, sustainable development is a complex field with lots of moving parts. How do you manage to stay informed and on top of events? What news sources and other resources do you routinely read to stay informed on sustainable development? Wonderful question. Sustainable development, I always like to emphasize, and you know from Chapter 1 of The Age of Sustainable Development, has two parts to it. One is an analytical side, which says how do the pieces of economics, social dynamics, environmental dynamics, and governance fit together. So it's a systems approach to human society. The other aspect of sustainable development is a normative or ethical side, which says our goals should be inclusive and environmentally sustainable economic development. So as an analytical field, it's tough, fascinating though, because it integrates economic, social, environmental, and political factors together. And the environmental factors are also systems, the hydrologic cycle, the carbon cycle, the dynamics of land use, ecosystem functions, and so forth. It's a lot to know. It's a lifetime of study and with every week new knowledge breakthroughs. So what do I do personally to try to stay engaged and aware? Of course, in general, I try to read widely across a lot of disciplines. Even though I'm trained as an economist, I find it extremely important to be reading in public health, in environmental science, in engineering, and so forth, to the best of my ability to understand each of those subspecialties. Second, I find it important to stay up to date by reading widely in daily or weekly journals the kind of information that we need. So every day, whether online or in print, I read a number of newspapers, and I find the Financial Times to be a really exceptionally good day-to-day coverage of a lot of key issues. And every week I try to read as best I can at least the less technical parts of the two world-leading scientific journals in the English language, which are Science Magazine and Nature Magazine. They are available to most of you through your universities, and I hope that you have an online resources accessible. Those two magazines are remarkable because every week there are scientific breakthroughs that are startling and completely of relevance for our field and our study, whether it's climate science or disease control or understanding economic development patterns. Those two magazines cover a wide area. Each of them has a front section ahead of the very technical papers that is more or less like the Week in Science, that summarizes many of the leading articles and policy issues in a way that those of us who aren't specialists in particular fields would find accessible. All of this is to say that because sustainable development intrinsically is multidisciplinary, because it crosses science, technology, economics, social, political considerations, it's not a simple field. It is a field of integrated knowledge. It's not simple to stay abreast of information. We have to keep our eyes open and absorb lots of ideas. And I find that since I'm a social scientist, keeping abreast of the physical sciences and technology developments is extremely important for me to keep that balance of perspective. So it's not a simple task for me or for anybody, but I would just urge you to read widely and learn over time about the linkages across all of these sectors of society. We have a question from Niels Dierlund. Professor Sachs, one of the critiques of the Millennium Development Goals was the lack of data. What is being done to better monitor the SDGs? This is, again, a great question. The Millennium Development Goals gained a lot of traction because they are quantified. They set clear goals, or at least relatively clear goals. And take MDG 4, for example. That is to reduce under 5 mortality by 2/3, comparing the 1990 U5MR, under 5 mortality rate, with the target of 2015. And MDG 5 has as a goal to reduce maternal mortality by 2015 by 3/4 compared to the 1990 baseline. So this raises several issues. First, are these good indicators? In the two cases I just mentioned, the answer is yes. Are they measurable? Yes. Are they measured with accuracy? In those two cases, probably not bad, but there's room for improvement. They're measured annually, they're reported annually, country by country. There was just a UNICEF report a couple of days ago, which you could find online, of the 2013 child mortality rates. Every year there are reports about maternal mortality rates. Other indicators are not measured so frequently or so well. The famous goal of cutting poverty by half, for example, depends on a good measurement of poverty. The World Bank has a particular standard. It is that people are living below $1.25 per person per day, measured in US dollars and at what is called the purchasing power parity prices, meaning not the local prices, $1.25, but an international standard of pricing across a number of relevant commodities. There are two big problems, even three big problems with this. First, poverty or extreme poverty is multidimensional. It's not just income, it's also about access to health care, access to education, access to safe water, and so forth. So there's a question of which dimensions of poverty to focus on. Second is getting the data on what does it mean to be living below $1.25 per person per day is not simple. It's based on survey work. Surveys are not very accurate in many cases, especially about income levels. Measuring the prices of various commodities is not simple. And finally, third, the time lag of these data can be 5 years or even longer. So we don't have World Bank poverty measurements since 2010, which is not acceptable, actually, for monitoring poverty when we have a goal for 2015 and we're 4 years out of date and with 1 year to go. It's not very operational. So all of this is to say, when the SDGs come, we need what is being called the SDG data revolution. We need timely data, at least annual reports, if not much more frequently. We need ground truthed and ground sourced data in our new information age. There ought to be ways to collect information that are quicker, GIS referenced, more usable for analytical purposes than we have. And there's a lot of discussion right now, including a new commission on SDG data, to try to establish a better system. I'm seeing in our own work that because of the access now to near universal connectivity, because of smartphone apps, because of GIS referencing, it's possible to have a much more sophisticated data system than was true even 5 years ago. And I think that we really need to implement very smart systems in the SDG period. So let me look at some other questions. Oh, Neil, sorry, or not sorry, you get two questions because you've asked a good one that lots of people are curious about. Since the environment is a global good, is it legitimate to sanction countries that lack appropriate environmental policies? I would say not just countries, but companies. When BP committed the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, it is legally responsible for both the cleanup and compensation. And BP will end up paying billions and billions of dollars for that oil spill. I think of other cases, however, in other parts of the world, say Shell and its long engagement in the Niger Delta. The Niger Delta is completely polluted. People are very sick. The oil spills over the last 60 years are carcinogenic. Lots of people have suffered. The environmental consequences on the water supply and biodiversity have been devastating. But there's been no responsibility, really, for Shell and other companies that have long been operating there. We need absolute responsibility. Both the polluter pay principle is extremely important, and compensation for the hazards that are caused by company actions is extremely important. We also need ways that countries can pursue environmental objectives without losing competitive advantage to those who aren't. And so there's a lot of talk as the world moves to carbon pricing, for example, carbon taxation, that there could be border tax adjustments against the goods of countries that are not taking care to put a price on carbon. And I think that those proposals make a lot of sense because they make it possible for countries to proceed without putting their individual companies and industries at a competitive disadvantage. These will all be topics for the COP21 negotiations coming ahead. I think it's also very important that the world call out countries that are not participating effectively in the climate change agreements. That, unfortunately, has been my own country, the United States. I would say Canada, Australia, among others, are not really stepping forward with the kinds of solutions that are needed right now. And we need global responsibility, not just one country or another, but every country to be part of the solutions. So this is an interesting question from Troy Anthony. Do you think we need to move toward a new definition of sustainable development and go so far as a citizen social responsibility in addition to corporate social responsibility? I think it's a terrific idea. We need a shared set of global values to underpin a new age of sustainable development. And those global values include rights and responsibilities. Of course, there is a long-standing and proper tradition about human rights, but there also needs to be a responsibility or a corresponding set of human responsibilities, especially for us to behave in a manner that is supportive of the world achieving sustainable development. I think at a minimum this would mean that we take seriously as individuals the upcoming sustainable development goals, that in our own activities and as citizens we are doing what we can to promote these sustainable development goals. There's a lot of talk about religious leaders and ethical leaders getting together to express to their congregations and constituencies how crucial it is that we join together in fighting climate change and in protecting the natural environment. And your idea of kind of citizen social responsibility, I think, could be a very important addition to that. So why don't you work up some more ideas, share them with our worldwide classroom, but I think you've introduced something quite important to the discussion. So let me take a question from Pedro Reynolds Cuellar. Professor Sachs, so what in your opinion is the best way to have local, even rural innovation playing a key role in the sustainable development conversation? We need problem solving at all levels. We need new technological breakthroughs that are really of global significance that then need to be applied locally. For example, breakthroughs in low carbon energy. What's also true is that we need to make sure that local communities are having a chance and a responsibility to contribute to their own local problem solving. Even when you have a global technology, say mobile phones or smartphones, the importance of that global technology for the local community depends on translating that general set of technological capacities to local needs. And with the smartphone, for example, one of our best pieces of recent technology, it's obvious we need local apps. We need apps that help local communities to make progress. Some of the big innovations that have come recently, such as the electronic wallet, payments electronically, have come interestingly in developing countries. Apple right now is saying that its iPhone 6 will have an electronic wallet, but in Kenya for the last 5 years, M-Pesa, which is a money wallet, electronic mobile money, that's been operational all along. So Apple is behind the curve. They're trying to catch up right now. They've got a lot of market clout. But the real innovations came locally in Kenya well before they will arrive in Manhattan, New York City, where I'm sitting right now. So there's a lot of potential for developing local applications. In some areas, in agriculture and in education and local language and in healthcare, the localization of technology is absolutely central. There may be a high-yield seed which works halfway around the world, but until it is properly designed for use in local agronomic conditions with the local pests, the local soils, the local climate, it won't work. So famously, agricultural technology needs to be localized. The same is true with healthcare, because the diseases that hit one place or another, obviously, as we see it tragically with the Ebola epidemic right now, these are also localized phenomena or regional, and so countries need their own capacity to face challenges like Ebola, like dengue fever, like malaria, and so on. Of course, these can be regional efforts, but there's a lot of local specificity. When it comes to educational technology, I believe that IT, just the way we're using it, is going to revolutionize education across the world, including in very poor areas, but it won't make sense for a curriculum to have been designed maybe 30 years ago in Europe or the United States, but used in a poor rural area in sub-Saharan Africa. And in many cases, the big breakthrough in education is going to come through local language learning. All of this is to say that local innovative capacity is extremely important. In general, technologies do not sit on their own locally, though occasionally one finds that, say, with local herbs or local mineral resources. Generally, technologies have a global aspect to them and a need for localization to adapt to local conditions. And that means that technology development also is a network, a global network, but one that also connects local actors. But it's a great question, and the whole idea of pushing the technological envelope is central to the achievement of sustainable development. So, Amy Reyes asks, sustainable development is a Herculean task indeed, and it needs participation from policymakers, companies, individuals, and institutions to be successful. How do we encourage them to participate? Are there any incentives in place? This indeed is one of the big questions. How does a whole world society steer towards sustainable development, especially when it's global scale challenges like climate change? And the best answer I know is that we start with global goals. It is that shared goal that gives us an orientation. The shared commitment, say, to keeping global warming below 2 degrees C. Now, having a global goal is not by itself sufficient to achieve it. That global goal then needs a roadmap. That roadmap at a general level can exist globally, but at a local and national level must be settled in the local or national context. That is the reason why we are establishing the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network. And I hope everyone knows that term, but if you don't, let me say it again. The United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network, UNSDSN. And if you go to unsdsn.org, you will see what this global network is doing. I want all of you as students to become engaged in this, mainly through your universities becoming partners with the SDSN. If you check on the SDSN website and find that your university is not a member, work with the faculty and other students to become members of the UN SDSN. Why is this important? Because the real way that we're going to steer towards these goals is for local and national actions everywhere to be moving in the direction of the goals. And the idea of the UN SDSN is to create a knowledge network which enables cities and countries and local businesses to become part of the SDG era. Now, more generally, universities are an important component of the solution, but not enough. We have inherently a multi-stakeholder challenge: government, business, civil society, communities, individuals. How do all of these groups interact? To some extent, I like to make an analogy to an orchestra, everybody playing a different instrument. But the funny thing about the orchestra of sustainable development is that there is no single conductor, that's for sure. So I have come to learn that there is a phenomenon and many examples of the so-called conductorless orchestra. So it's a whole orchestra, but it plays without a conductor, without somebody at the front with the baton. And the conductorless orchestra plays together quite beautiful music by the musicians having practice as a team, by looking at each other, by looking over the next shoulder, and of course by playing with the same sheet music in front of them. And so I emphasize that the world is probably at best closest to this kind of conductorless orchestra, where we all need to mobilize to play the same sheet music. Those would be the Sustainable Development Goals. What kind of incentives? Well, survival, goodwill, shared values are part of it, but we also need to have incentives that are more concrete and specific. I talked just a few minutes ago about border taxes to keep products from countries that are not doing their job having to face a steeper hurdle for import to other countries that would correct for the failure of the producing country to pursue environmental objectives. Another example of how to create incentives that are important and pervasive would be, for example, in the climate area, for countries to put a carbon tax in place that would give a market signal to all producers. If you emit carbon dioxide, you pay the social cost of the carbon that you're emitting. This is a tax that could be collected, for example, from the oil, coal, and gas companies to reflect the social cost of using those products by burning them and emitting CO2 into the atmosphere. So we need to find systems of incentives that can be applied in a relatively decentralized way to permit the coordination and cooperation of a conductorless orchestra to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Not a simple answer, but it's also not a simple question, so I'm going to use that excuse. We don't know yet how to coordinate in this area. So Another good question. Okay, Pedro Reynolds Cuellar, you've got a second question. A lot of people are interested in knowing what, in my opinion, are some of the best opportunities for startups and social enterprises in regard to sustainable development. I think a very strong area certainly is renewable energy. There will be lots of opportunities for off-grid or microgrid deployment of renewable energy systems, for example, solar power, in rural communities that right now don't have access to modern electricity services. I think there will be lots of opportunity for social business in agriculture, in rural agriculture, because this is another area where smallholder farmers, by getting together as cooperatives, for example, can make a breakthrough. I think there will be great opportunities for startups in the area of information systems for sustainable development, monitoring and planning systems, and also for educational improvements. One of the big challenges that we face in the world is that not only are hundreds of millions of kids not in secondary school when they should be, and still tens of millions not even in primary school, but the quality of the education needs dramatically to be improved. And I believe, and my colleagues believe, that information technology will be an absolutely critical way to make that breakthrough. Well, that's a great opportunity for startups and social enterprises as well. Local language relevant curricula for communities, for all communities, but I would say especially for low-income communities that can benefit tremendously from the information technology. I have time for one more question, and I appreciate your patience, so we'll go for 40 minutes today. Let me take a last question from Baldwin Hum, who asks, how do we change the discussion surrounding classical economic models that consider well-being, along with a host of other factors, to be, quote, externalities, rather than critical issues that need to be included in those calculations? In other words, how do we make things like climate change not a special case, but central? And that is a terrific question. What are our goals? What are our metrics? You know, in mainstream economics, it's said the market provides the invisible hand, or in other words, is self-organizing to maximize the well-being of the individuals in the society. We know that's not true. As a practical matter, markets do not solve many problems. They don't solve problems of poverty. They don't solve problems of social cohesion. They don't solve problems of maintaining and promoting social capital and trust. They don't solve problems of environmental sustainability. We also know that economic metrics like GDP, the gross domestic product, can be relevant but are not adequate as measures of well-being. So the Sustainable Development Goals will aim to extend our reach and our perspective, first by putting economics alongside social objectives and environmental objectives. Second, by directing our attention to new specific metrics. Third, by emphasizing the systemic nature of our challenges rather than simply the individual nature of our challenges. And fourth, by introducing new creative ways to address well-being. One of those that I like very much and work on with my colleagues is what is called SWB, subjective well-being measurements. These are the kinds of questions that are now being asked with increasing frequency by economists, psychologists, and policymakers. Are you satisfied with your life? If you view life as a ladder, with the highest rung of the ladder being the best you can think about for your life, and the lowest rung of a ladder being the worst situation, if the ladder has 10 rungs, where would you put your own life situation? This is in psychology called the Cantril ladder, but it's a subjective evaluation of well-being. Now, for a long time, social scientists weren't too interested in questions like that. They said, well, that's very subjective. We should objectively study what people do as consumers, so-called revealed preference. But in the last 20 years, there has been more and more attention to both the realism and the ability to study people's feelings about their own well-being, their subjective well-being. And so the Cantril ladder, life as a ladder of 10 rungs, or other measures of life satisfaction have taken on more and more significance. And we have been publishing in the last couple of years the World Happiness Report. You can find it online, both the 2012 and 2013 editions, and there will be a new edition in the spring of 2015. The World Happiness Report is based on these measures of subjective well-being, of life satisfaction. And the chapters in the World Happiness Report are studies showing systematically these measures of well-being can be explained not just according to economics, how rich a person is, but also according to sociological factors such as the social support networks of individuals, or the political factors such as the perception of the honesty of government, or the health factors, the health of the individual. So the point is that in order to put measures of economic well-being at the core, we need to be able to define, describe, measure, and monitor well-being. And there's a lot of progress in that. The Sustainable Development Goals will add further impetus, but as you will read in the World Happiness Report, we already have a lot of good information collected annually now about people's life satisfaction that we can put, that we can use to put these issues at the center of the development agenda. And that's what I believe that 2015 will do. The post-2015 Sustainable Development Agenda will be a more holistic approach to well-being, in which externalities, so-called, are not viewed as the small special cases, but are part of our central focus. Let me thank all of you for participating today. I want to thank all of you for being part of the course. Please follow me at Jeff D. Sachs on Twitter, because I'm using the Twitter feed to have our daily discussions when we're not having Google Hangouts. So it's at Jeff D. Sachs. Please follow me on that, and it's #SUSDev. Look forward to seeing you in class and to being together on the next Google Hangout. Have a great week, and pay attention to all the interesting developments in the opening of the UN General Assembly and the Climate Summit. Take care.